Out here on Route 40, most stories blow away with the dust. But when a young rookie glimpsed an old tattoo on a quiet driver's arm, it set off a chain reaction no one saw coming. Who was Gunnar, and why did so many fear and respect the man who never spoke of his past? The gas station sat quietly at mile marker 247, nestled between a stretch of cracked asphalt and the endless rustling plains of Route 40. It was the kind of place that barely registered unless your tank was running dry or your eyelids were losing the fight. Most drivers pulled in, fueled up, grabbed a stale coffee, and moved on. But for those who ran the Western Circuit long enough, there was one truck you might spot more than once, and always in the same condition. A midnight blue Peterbilt, polished to perfection, with a faded U.S. Marine Corps sticker sun-bleached on the back window. The truck belonged to a man everyone just called Gunnar. No last name, no first name, no stories. He parked in the same spot every time, right beside pump 3, back slightly so he could see the whole lot and the diner window. Always arrived around 2:15 a.m., left before the sun peeked over the plains. No music, no phone, no CB chatter, just silence and diesel. Nate, barely 23 and still figuring out how to shift gears without grinding metal, had been driving solo for only 3 months. The job wasn't what he expected. Long hours, tight delivery windows, a dispatcher who acted like GPS delays were a personal insult. His boss, Jerry Langdon, kept pushing him to skip way stations if you're not hauling live cargo, and cut sleep if you're 5 hours behind. So when Nate pulled into the Route 40 stop, dead tired and nervous about the next leg, he wasn't looking for a mentor. He just wanted caffeine and a clean bathroom. He didn't even notice the truck at first. But inside the diner, while pouring sugar into his coffee with trembling hands, he caught a glimpse of the older man seated by the window. His posture wasn't just upright, it was alert, like someone who hadn't unlearned how to scan a perimeter. He wore a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled high despite the night chill. That's when Nate saw it, partially obscured by sun-spotted skin and age, but unmistakable to someone who paid attention. A barely visible tattoo on the upper forearm. It wasn't flashy, just a faded emblem, half-worn by time, but it sent a jolt through Nate's spine. Recon. Not a unit you could fake. Not a tattoo you got in your 20s to look cool. This man had been through things. Nate hesitated but walked over, coffee still in hand. "Hey, you mind if I sit?" Gunnar glanced at him once, gave the faintest nod. Silence stretched as Nate awkwardly sipped his drink. "I think I've seen your truck before," Nate offered. "Route 40, right?" No answer. Nate shifted in his seat. "That tattoo. It's recon, isn't it? My uncle was force recon. Iraq and Somalia." Still no reply. Gunnar kept his eyes fixed out the window, watching headlights blink in and out on the far highway. But then, with a voice so gravelly it sounded unused, he said, "Then your uncle earned more respect than most." That was it. Just that. Nate didn't know what to say next, so he didn't. He finished his coffee, nodded in thanks, and left. The next day, word started moving quietly the way things do among truckers. Someone had spotted the tattoo. Someone had spoken to Gunnar. A name came up, Recon. No details. But for the older drivers, that was enough. Within a week, veterans began altering their routes slightly, timing their fuel stops to line up with Gunnar's. Some just nodded in passing. A few saluted. One driver left a bag of military-issue MREs on his step with no note. Gunnar said nothing, never even acknowledged it. But he noticed. Always did. Meanwhile, Nate's situation with Langdon grew worse. The dispatcher started texting him while he was driving, demanding updates, pressuring him to meet deadlines that required skipping breaks. When Nate protested, Langdon told him to man up or pack up, and drivers were starting to talk about brakes not being checked, of trailers sent out overweight or with bad tires. First, Nate thought about quitting, but something about Gunnar's silence, his presence, made him want to stick it out. He began to change small things. Double-check his vehicle before each trip. Offer to help others with their loads. Speak up quietly when something looked off. One night, after a grueling 12-hour haul, Nate returned to that same diner. Gunnar was there again, same table, same seat. Nate didn't ask to sit this time. He just dropped into the chair across from him and said, "They're cutting corners, pushing us to run dirty. I don't know if I'm supposed to stay quiet or if I should do something." Gunnar didn't look at him, just took a slow sip of coffee. Then finally he said, "They'll test your line. Every man has one. Most don't even know where theirs is until someone crosses it." Nate frowned. "And if they cross it?" Now Gunnar looked at him just once. "Then you remind them why that line was drawn in the first place." He stood up, placed a crumpled $5 bill on the counter, and walked out into the night. Nate sat there a long time, watching the taillights disappear into the dark, wondering just how many lines Gunnar had drawn and how many he'd been forced to defend. There are two kinds of stories out on the open road. The ones people tell too loudly to be believed, and the ones whispered so quietly they become legend. Gunnar's name, what little of it was known, now belonged to the second kind. After Nate's late-night conversation with him at the diner, word spread fast. Not from Nate. He never said much. But truckers are observant, especially the old-school ones. The ones with service stripes on their jackets and worn boots that never left the cab. They started noticing patterns. Gunnar was always calm, always alone, and always watching. Not in a paranoid way, just like someone trained to study rooms, measure exits, and read people before they spoke. Then came the morning that changed everything. It happened in silence. Gunnar pulled into the Route 40 station like he always did. 2:15 a.m. Pump 3, windows down, flannel shirt, clean shave, boots still dusted with last week's miles. Nothing out of the ordinary, until a sleek black SUV pulled in behind him. No lights, no sound system, no license plate visible. Out stepped a man in his late 50s, trim haircut, sharp eyes, tailored jacket over a civilian shirt. He looked like someone who used to wear stars on his collar but now wore boardroom power like body armor. He didn't speak, didn't nod, just walked up to Gunnar's parked truck, reached into his coat, and pulled out a challenge coin. A heavy, polished piece of brass with a trident and anchor on one side, an eagle on the other. The kind only given, never bought. The kind that meant, "I know who you are, and I respect it." The man placed the coin gently on Gunnar's dashboard through the open window. He didn't wait, didn't linger. Then he got back into his car and drove off. Gunnar sat inside, motionless, never touched the coin, never looked at it. But for the few drivers who witnessed it, from the diner window or the shadows of their rigs, it was enough. The ghost had a past. 2 days later, trouble rolled onto Route 40 like a storm. Unmarked vans, shortwave radio chatter, and a sudden spike in high-value cargo thefts had drivers running scared. The attacks were fast and efficient, like military strikes, but dirty. Masked men boxed in trailers on lonely stretches, jammed CBs, and forced drivers out. Sometimes they left them in the ditch. Sometimes worse. The cops couldn't keep up. The companies didn't care. It was all insured. But the drivers? They were just another cost of doing business. Jerry Langdon, Nate's boss, didn't seem worried. He even bragged about cutting side deals with third-party brokers. "If we run fast enough, they won't catch us," he said. Speed beats fear. But Nate wasn't buying it anymore. He'd started checking his rig every morning, replacing cracked straps, securing his load twice. He kept a folding knife tucked behind his seat now. And before each delivery, he would make a silent detour just to the diner, just to see if Gunnar's truck was there. Somehow it calmed him. But on the night of the Henderson load, his first high-value solo haul, Gunnar wasn't at the stop. Nate's trailer was loaded with engine parts worth nearly $200,000, bound for a distribution center in Arizona. The schedule was tight. The route ran straight through the red zone, where the last 3 hijackings had occurred. Langdon said not to worry. "If anyone pulls up, don't stop. They won't chase you." But that wasn't how it played out. Around 3:40 a.m., somewhere near an abandoned way station, Nate noticed the taillights ahead disappear, just vanish, swallowed by darkness. His heart ticked up. He lowered his speed, looked in the side mirror. 2 black SUVs, no lights, closing in fast. Before he could react, one pulled in front, braking hard. The other boxed him in from the side. Nate hit the horn. Useless. He tried to radio in dead static. Jammed. The vans didn't shout, didn't wave guns. They just moved methodically as if they'd done this before. One man jumped from the front vehicle and approached with a pry tool. Another circled the trailer, scanning the axle. Nate's breath fogged up the inside of his windshield. He reached for the knife. His hands shook. Then, just as the rear door of the trailer began to swing open, a sound. Not loud, just precise. Thunk, followed by a snap like compressed air releasing. Then chaos. One of the masked men went down with a muffled grunt. The other spun, but too late. A shadow blurred past the trailer, low to the ground, then high. A crack of elbow to jaw. A grunt. Silence. Nate watched, frozen, as a figure emerged from the darkness. He wore no mask, just boots, dark jeans, a jacket thrown over his flannel shirt. Gunner. He moved like someone who'd trained for this. Not like a soldier in a movie, more efficient. Less show. One by one, the hijackers were disarmed, zip-tied with their own gear, and lined up beside their vehicles. Gunner never raised his voice, never used a weapon beyond his hands and surroundings. When it was over, he stepped up to Nate's door. "You good?" Nate exhaled, finally. "Yeah." Gunner nodded once. "Drive. Don't stop again till daylight." Nate gripped the wheel. "Wait, what about them?" Gunner glanced back. "They'll be found." And just like that, he vanished into the night, walking off the road like a man returning to silence. The next morning, trucker forums buzzed with stories. None confirmed, all impossible to verify. They say a recon ghost stopped a hijacking last night. Saw a guy in flannel zip-tie 3 armed men in under 2 minutes. Challenge coin on the dashboard. He never even touched it. Nate said nothing. He kept driving. But he added something new to his ritual, a coin. Not the original, of course. That was still on Gunner's dash. But he found a similar one online. Placed it on his own dashboard. Not to pretend. Just to remember. Because now the legend wasn't just a whisper. It had a face. And it drove a midnight blue Peterbilt. There's a silence that follows violence. Not the kind that comes with fear, but the stillness of aftermath, the calm of a storm's wake. Nate had felt it after the ambush on Route 40. He kept seeing the blur of Gunner's movement, hearing the soft snap of wrist locks, the thud of masked men hitting gravel. He knew what he'd witnessed, and it wasn't luck. It was training. It was pain turned into precision. In the days that followed, Nate found himself changed. He was no longer the rookie blindly following dispatch orders. He started asking questions about his loads, about safety, and quietly about Gunner. At first, nobody had much. The man paid in cash, took odd jobs, changed routes frequently, drove clean but carried no logos, no plates on record, no fuel card, no paper trail. But then Nate talked to an older dispatcher named Rosa, who remembered him from years back. "Used to go by Gunner, because of some deployment near Baja," she said, tapping ashes into a coffee can behind the terminal. "I think it's stuck." "Deployment?" Nate pressed. She nodded slowly. "He wasn't always driving trucks, kid. Before the war, he was a ghost in uniform. Recon Marine, I think. One of the ones who didn't ask for medals but had too many." She paused. "He had a family, wife and kid, stationed overseas while he was deployed somewhere else. Bombing at a market. Wrong place, wrong time. After that, he disappeared from the base. Showed up a year later in Texas. Driving. That was all she had. Back on the road, the logistics network was unraveling. Something dark had started gnawing at its edges. First the thefts, now arson. It started with the Richmond Depot, a major distribution hub for truckers moving through the Southwest. It went up in flames during a routine night shift. Over 24 workers were inside. The blaze caught fast, climbing stacks of wooden pallets and old tires like a match tossed in dry kindling. Flames punched through the roof within minutes. Emergency systems failed. Alarms jammed. Nate heard about it through CB chatter the next morning. Whole place lit up like a war zone. Some folks barely got out. There were people still inside when the fire hit the load-in bay. But there was one story that made everyone fall quiet. Gunnar had been passing through mid-delivery, just a few miles away. He spotted the flames from the highway. No hesitation. He didn't radio it in. Didn't stop for permission. He pulled hard onto the shoulder, leapt from the cab, and ran into the smoke. Workers staggered out in coughing groups, blinking through ash, too shocked to speak. Somewhere inside, two men were trapped beneath a collapsed storage rack, one with a broken leg, the other unconscious from smoke. By the time fire crews arrived, they found both workers lying on the grass, breathing. Gunnar was gone. The next day, a photo surfaced. A blurry phone shot, taken by a warehouse supervisor as he stumbled away from the blaze. It showed a man carrying one worker over his shoulder and dragging another by the collar with his free hand. Smoke behind him, his face half covered by a cloth. But the boots and jacket, unmistakable. Nate stared at the photo for nearly an hour in the diner. He could hear the whispers now. That's him. That's the same guy from Route 40. Who is he? The answer came a few hours later, when a local news van found Gunnar refueling off Route 22. A young reporter hopped out with a camera, breathless. "Sir, were you involved in the rescue at the Richmond depot?" Gunnar didn't flinch, just looked at her for a second. "You ran into a burning building. Why?" He looked away, then answered softly, "Real heroes are in Arlington's graves." And with that, he stepped into his truck and drove off. The interview lasted 6 seconds. It aired across 3 states that night. Nate sat alone in the diner afterward, swirling cold coffee in his cup. The photo was still up on his phone, and Gunnar's words echoed deeper than any news clip. He wasn't really a legend. He was a man who had lost everything and decided to spend what was left of himself doing what others wouldn't. No parades or headlines, just a quiet war of one. Nate realized something else too. The world had stopped making men like Gunnar. But maybe it still needed them. And maybe the rest of them, those who were lucky enough to see what he did, had a choice. Not to follow, but to step up. Later that night, Nate opened a blank page in his journal, the one he kept for route notes and mileage logs. On the top, he wrote, "What I learned from the fire. Some people carry flames. Others run into them." He didn't need to write Gunnar's name. He knew it. And now, so did the world. The years blurred like highway lights in the rain. Route 40 changed, new signs, smoother pavement in some places, more potholes in others. But for Nate, certain things remained constant. His worn leather gloves in the glove box, a folded photo of the old Richmond depot before the fire, and the quiet lessons Gunnar had left behind. Nate never tried to become Gunnar. That would have been impossible. But he carried the man's presence in every decision he made. As the youngest fleet supervisor ever appointed in the region, he was known for 3 things: enforcing safety like a religion, listening before speaking, and always having the back of the drivers, even when the office didn't. He had Gunnar to thank for all of it. By the time Gunnar's name came up again, he had already retired. No announcement, no farewell party, no last delivery signed with a flourish. Just gone. One day his rig didn't appear at dispatch. His name vanished from the route rotation. No goodbyes, not even a forwarded address. But a few of the older drivers knew where he'd be, exactly where he always was. Nate wasn't surprised when word reached him that Gunnar had been seen fueling up in Amarillo, polishing the same old rig, now a little rusted at the fenders. He was heading out early, someone said. One last haul. Others claimed. But no one knew where or why. It was a foggy spring morning when it happened. A string of trucks, stretched over miles, started pulling over to the shoulders of Route 40. No calls were made. No emails sent. It was instinct, a ripple across the brotherhood of the road. No instructions, just a shared understanding. They lined up one by one, hazard lights blinking in the dawn mist. Some stood outside their cabs, hands in their pockets. Others remained inside, heads bowed slightly, radios silent. At 5:43 a.m., a single rig appeared through the haze. Nate stood near mile marker 88, alone, clutching something small in his hand. He'd taken a personal day, told no one why, just waited. And when he saw the truck approach, the unmistakable silhouette, still clean, still silent, he stepped forward. The chrome caught the morning sun. The paint had faded with time, but the lines were unmistakable. No decals, no vanity plates. The same quiet rig that had once parked at the edge of a fire, that had intercepted hijackers on a black highway, that had refused interviews and medals alike. Gunnar didn't stop, but as he passed, he gave a slight nod, barely perceptible. Inside the cab on the dash, Nate saw something glint. For a moment, he thought it was the same challenge coin the Navy commander had once left years ago, but it wasn't. It was a new one, different engraving, probably left by someone else, someone Gunnar had saved in a way only they understood. Gunnar's eyes never left the road, and just like that, he was gone. Trucks remained still long after he passed. Not a horn sounded, not a single engine turned over, just silence, reverence. Nate opened his palm. In it was the original coin, the first one, the one placed on Gunnar's dashboard years before. He had found it later, tucked inside the lining of a duffel bag Gunnar left behind in a terminal locker. Without explanation, just that coin. Now Nate understood why. Some burdens are passed silently, like a baton or a torch. No one saw Gunnar again after that day. Rumors circled. Some said he retired to a cabin near the Rockies. Others whispered he was still driving, but only at night, showing up when things turned bad. But none of that mattered, because the truth was simpler. He had taken his last ride. And every driver who stood on that shoulder, every mechanic, every dispatcher, every warehouse hand who heard the story, they all carried something forward, not just in memory, but in practice. They watched out for the new guys, checked their mirrors twice, pulled over when no one else would, drove not for the bonus, but for the man who reminded them what the road could really mean. Late that night, Nate walked through the empty yard behind the main terminal. He opened a maintenance locker and pulled out a plaque he had custom-made but never hung. It read, "The quietest man we knew showed us the loudest kind of courage. Gunnar, U.S. Marine, trucker, brother of the road." He didn't put it on the wall. He left it in the common room, leaning against the table where rookies filled out their first route sheets, where it could be found not as a monument but as a reminder. This story makes us reflect on the silent heroes who walk among us, those who lead not with words, but with actions. If you were Nate, would you have followed the whispers or the man's example? Comment below, what would you have done? And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more powerful tales like this.